Brussels is in a panic, and Ursula von der Leyen is losing the levers of power. Trump is returning, European leaders are bypassing the European Commission, and old scandals are coming to the surface. Is this the end of the Brussels bureaucracy or the beginning of a new era for the EU? Let's figure it out right now. A loud scandal has broken out in Europe, and it seems that one of the most difficult periods in her political career has come for European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen. For a long time, she played a key role in managing political processes in the European Union and building public discourse, which allowed her to establish herself as one of the most influential figures in European politics. However, this position has faced serious challenges recently. The Brussels bureaucracy, headed by von der Leyen, is accustomed to full confidence in its decisions and to the fact that its statements find wide support in the European media space. Nevertheless, real events are increasingly making adjustments to the established order of things. Earlier, criticism of the European Union's policy, especially in the field of energy and geopolitical issues, was expressed mainly by individual national leaders, such as Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán, who has repeatedly expressed his concern about the course of Brussels. However, US President Donald Trump has now come out with harsh criticism. In his recent speech, he questioned a number of key EU decisions, touching upon issues of energy security and Europe's relationship with Russia. His statements sounded like a serious challenge to the official position of Brussels, and the arguments that have shaped European public opinion for many years have been subjected to harsh revision. The part of Trump's speech devoted to the situation in the energy sector was particularly resonant. He directly pointed out the contradictions in the rhetoric of European leaders, who declared their rejection of Russian energy resources, but, in fact, continued to purchase them. This moment has become extremely inconvenient for the EU leadership, as official statements by politicians, including Ursula von der Leyen, French President Emmanuel Macron, and German Chancellor Olaf Scholz, have repeatedly stated that the European Union has managed to overcome dependence on Russian energy resources and found alternative sources of supply. However, the facts tell a different story. The key moment of Trump's speech, delivered in Congress, caused a wide resonance, as he questioned the very concept of European energy independence. He stated literally the following: "Unfortunately, Europe has spent more money on buying Russian oil and gas than on defending Ukraine. Think about it." These words sent a loud signal to all those who follow the dynamics of international relations and radically changed the perception of the situation. Up to this point, the EU's official position was based on the thesis of a complete break with Russian energy resources, which was actively supported by the European media. However, after Trump's speech, even leading European publications began to acknowledge the existence of certain contradictions. It became known that Brussels actually postponed the implementation of the program for the complete abandonment of Russian gas, which called into question the statements about the achieved independence. This was a serious image blow for Ursula von der Leyen, who for many months assured the European public that the EU was moving towards a new energy era free of supplies from Russia. Meanwhile, the situation with gas reserves in Europe is really worrying. According to the latest data, the gas deficit in the EU countries has already reached 20 billion cubic meters, which indicates serious problems with ensuring energy stability. Additional confirmation was received from the Russian company Gazprom, which stated that gas reserves in Europe's underground storage facilities are declining at an accelerated pace. These data indicate that Europe is using the gas reserves accumulated in previous years. The strategic reserves that were supposed to help the EU countries survive the winter without any problems have been almost exhausted. For the first time in many years, European countries are forced to resort to using gas from reserve storage facilities, which poses risks for the upcoming heating season. For Ursula von der Leyen, the current situation poses a serious challenge. Her energy security policy has been heavily criticized, and now she faces the need to explain the reality to the public. On the one hand, Brussels cannot officially recognize that Russian energy supplies are continuing, as this would cast doubt on the effectiveness of the sanctions policy. On the other hand, a complete rejection of these supplies could lead to economic difficulties that would negatively affect both industry and ordinary European citizens. Relations between Trump and von der Leyen also remain tense. According to a number of European media reports, their political views and approaches to international politics differ significantly. During the years of Trump's presidency, U.S. policy towards Europe has undergone significant changes. Washington insisted that European countries increase defense spending and reduce their dependence on American aid within the framework of NATO. Relations between and von der Leyen also remain tense. According to a number of European media report, our political views and approaches to international politics differ significantly. During the years of Trump's presidency, U.S. policy towards Europe has undergone significant changes. Washington insisted that European countries increase defense spending and reduce their dependence on American aid within the framework of NATO. In addition, the Trump administration demanded that the EU pay for energy resources at higher market prices, which significantly changed the economic relationship between the United States and Europe. After the return of Donald Trump to the White House, the positions of the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, have become much less stable. However, his loud statement about Russian gas turned out to be far from the only challenge he threw at the Brussels bureaucracy. According to information published by Politico, the new U.S. president does not plan to hold meetings with representatives of European Union institutions, including the head of the European Commission. Instead, his administration relies on bilateral negotiations with national leaders, returning Europe to the model of 19th-century diplomacy, when key states negotiated directly, without the participation of top government structures. This approach calls into question the very need for the European Commission as a political institution. Even if Washington prefers to ignore Brussels, it means that its influence in the international arena is waning. Trump's recent contacts with European leaders have confirmed this new course. He has already held talks with French President Emmanuel Macron, Polish President Andrzej Duda, and his Vice President, J.D. Vance, met with the leader of the German opposition alternative. Trump's recent contacts with European leaders have confirmed this new course. He has already held talks with French President Emmanuel Macron, Polish President Andrzej Duda, and his Vice President, J.D. Vance, met with the leader of the German opposition alternative for Germany party, Alice Weidel. These meetings demonstrated a new U.S. strategy. Washington now interacts exclusively with the leaders of national governments, completely bypassing the institutions of the European Union. This approach destroys the concept of a united Europe as a single negotiating entity and demonstrates that the United States now prefers to do business only with those with real power, rather than with Brussels bureaucrats whose political mandate is limited. A striking example of this change was the exclusion of Ursula von der Leyen from key negotiation processes. According to European media reports, she was unable to get even to bilateral meetings within the framework of. A striking example of this change was the exclusion of Ursula von der Leyen from key negotiation processes. According to European media reports, she was unable to get even to bilateral meetings within the framework of the Munich Security Conference, as representatives of the American administration did not express a desire to negotiate with her. For the first time in many years, the head of the European Commission was actually excluded from the dialogue with the White House. This can be seen as a symbolic event that shows that the Trump administration does not perceive the Brussels bureaucracy as an equal partner in the international arena. An additional proof of Washington's new strategy was the behavior of American diplomats in Europe. During official visits to Paris, Berlin, and Warsaw, representatives of the Trump administration did not even consider the possibility of arriving in Brussels or organizing meetings with the heads of European institutions. This clearly demonstrates that the United States now prefers to work directly with national governments, ignoring the central structures of the European Union. In the new geopolitical reality, the EU is no longer seen as an independent player, and its political influence is significantly waning. Against this background, many European leaders are beginning to think about the future of the European Union and its role in international relations. Ideas about the need for Europe's strategic autonomy, which would allow EU countries to independently determine their foreign policy, without relying on the decisions of Brussels, are increasingly being heard in Paris and Berlin. In turn, Poland is betting on strengthening relations with the United States and, in fact, benefits from Washington's new approach. Donald Trump has made it clear that national leaders are important to him, not Brussels officials with no real power. This trend is especially noticeable against the background of recent statements by the American authorities on the revision of trade relations with Europe. However, as emphasized in the White House, they will discuss this issue not with the President of the European Commission, but with representatives of the national governments of the leading EU countries. This means that Brussels is effectively excluded from negotiations on key economic issues, and its role in shaping the global agenda is being reduced. For Ursula von der Leyen, the current situation was a serious blow. For many years, she acted as a representative of a united Europe, but now it turned out that, in the conditions of a changing world order, her political weight has significantly decreased. Her absence from key meetings and conferences was an obvious confirmation that the European Commission is losing influence not only in relations with the United States, but also within the European Union itself. The Trump administration relies on national leaders, considering them real partners, and sees the Brussels bureaucracy more as an auxiliary structure. Moreover, Washington openly criticizes the European Union's approach to democracy, freedom of speech, and political governance. The American administration is increasingly pointing out inconsistencies in Brussels' rhetoric and its actual actions, emphasizing that the EU is facing internal contradictions that prevent it from effectively shaping its foreign policy. In such circumstances, the future of the European Commission and its current leadership remains uncertain, and its influence in the international arena continues to weaken. U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance's speech in Brussels was particularly revealing, as he criticized the cancellation or postponement of elections in a number of European Union countries. He noted that such decisions can weaken citizens' trust in state institutions and cast doubt on the democratic principles on which the European Union is based. His statement came amid growing discontent with the policies of Brussels, which is exerting significant pressure on Eastern European countries, especially Hungary and Poland, seeking a more independent course. In this context, I recall the recent discussions in the European Parliament, during which issues related to political regulation and control of information dissemination in the EU were discussed. Many European politicians have expressed concern that measures to combat disinformation may restrict freedom of expression in practice. This situation is particularly noticeable against the background of statements by the European Commission on the need to counter the so-called Russian narratives, which is increasingly perceived as a tool to exclude opinions from the public space that do not coincide with the official position of Brussels. At the same time, Ursula von der Leyen, who heads the European Commission, is extremely cautious in her remarks about former and possibly future U.S. President Donald Trump. The reasons for this restraint are obvious. She is aware that the new administration in Washington may have information that would cast doubt not only on her own activities, but also on the functioning of the Brussels bureaucracy as a whole. As long as the White House remained under the control of the Democratic Party, von der Leyen could afford harsh statements, pursue a harsh anti-Russian policy, and criticize countries that, in her opinion, did not meet the democratic standards of the EU. However, the political situation has changed. Von der Leyen finds herself in a difficult situation, as even her most loyal allies are gradually losing interest in her. However, this is not the only problem that the European Commission may face. Another potential challenge is related to the possible resumption of the investigation into the procurement of vaccines. In the 21st year, the leadership of the European Commission signed a multi-billion-dollar contract with Pfizer, with a significant part of the negotiations conducted personally by von der Leyen, without following standard procedures. The total amount of the deal exceeded 35 billion euros, and the details of the contract are still classified. When the investigation began, the European Commission refused to provide correspondence with Pfizer representatives, and then suddenly it became known that the case had been closed. However, now, in the context of a possible change in the political configuration in Germany, some parties are demanding that consideration of this issue be resumed. In France, Italy, the Netherlands, and even Germany, there are already statements that the existing EU model requires changes. Orbán openly declares that Hungary will not be able to independently influence the policy of the Union, but if Germany joins his initiative, Brussels will not be able to ignore this challenge. The main question is whether it will be possible to carry out reforms in a calm mode, or whether Europe will face a period of political instability. In the current situation, the European Commission continues to emphasize its importance, but national leaders increasingly prefer to negotiate directly, bypassing the Brussels bureaucracy. Friends, now I would like to express my opinion. Reading this material, I get the feeling that we are witnessing tectonic shifts in world politics. When Trump returns and the European Commission loses its influence, it is no longer just a change of rhetoric. It is a blow to the entire system that has ruled Europe from Brussels for many years. Von der Leyen, who until recently confidently dictated terms to the EU countries, now finds herself in a position where her opinion is simply ignored. And if the old scandals really get a new twist, then her political career may end much louder than she expected. But what surprises me most is the fact how quickly the image of an independent Europe is crumbling. If the media, which have shaped public opinion for decades, were actually funded from Washington, how can we now believe in their objectivity? Ironically, it is Trump, whom many in Europe considered a threat, who now gives the countries of the Euro Union a chance for real independence. The only question is whether they will be able to take advantage of this chance or remain hostage to the old Brussels system. Friends, what do you think about this? Be sure to write your opinion in the comments. Thank you for liking and subscribing to the channel. It's very important to me. See you.